Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. This episode of Slam the Gavel is sponsored by CPS Protect Consulting Services. A child protective services case is one of the most frightening experiences for any parent. Don't face it alone. Face it with confidence with Urgent Assist by CPS Protect. You can have access to former CPS investigators to make sure you preserve your rights and protect your family. If you're facing CPS involvement and aren't sure where to turn, their child welfare consultants can help you. Visit cpsprotect.com/subscribe and enter the coupon code SLAMTHEGAVEL for 10% off your first year of Urgent Assist. And this is available in all 50 states. I have another announcement. Bradley's mother, Narcus Golan, passed away last fall of 2022. Bradley is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to the Italian Social Services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he can't speak or understand the language. He will then be taken away from the only family he has ever known. And we have Judge Ann Donnelly to thank for this. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390 to please keep Bradley here safe in these United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. I have a brand new guest on. I have Felix Leo Campos on, and he has been a key figure in the formation of access centers in New York City, beginning with Manhattan Neighborhood Network, where he also served on his board of directors. He's worked in the industry with noted professionals such as Ted Nathanson, NBC Sports Director, and multi-Emmy award winner. His studio production experience was honed in the commercial sphere at Solomon, Smith, Barney, and B.E.T. During his production career, he focused on promoting cultural entertainment and artistic events as a way of attracting new audiences to galleries, museums, in cultural centers in neighborhoods where the mainstream dared not to tread. This eventually led Felix to join other community investors and neighborhood stakeholders in forming La Fortaleza Community Development Corporation, whose focus is implementing arts and culture as vehicles for economic development and cultural maintenance in ethnic communities. We're going to have a great conversation. We're going to talk about non-custodial parents, and the aim of the narrative is to bring attention to the double standard and institutionalized abuses that moms and dads are facing in these community family kangaroo divorce courts. And I totally welcome you to the podcast, Felix Leo Campos. How are you doing this morning?
Thank you, Marianne, for the invitation, for having me on the show. I'm alive, well, still walking on 2 legs.
Yeah, exactly. Thank God, thank God for that.
Absolutely.
To get through all of this and what we all have been through, and these systematic abuses brought on by the family court system, and sometimes through CPS.
Yeah. And here in New York, CPS is known as the Administration for Children's Services, ACS.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It did have another name, by the way. I'm trying to think of what it was, and I can't because it was so long ago. And what spurred that change was a rash of foster parent abuses of children that were in their care. Most notably, and this is the one that I guess broke the camel's back, is that of 4 or 6-year-old Eitan Pass in Manhattan. His parents were arrested. They were prosecuted. They were incarcerated. And that shone the light on the failures of ACS to care for children that were under their care through the foster parent system. And that isn't only true with ACS, but it's also true with a lot of other agencies and third-party organizations that serve with family and divorce court.
Mm-hmm. Right, and also the Thomas Valva case as well
in Long Island. Yes, that's and I'm, for the life of me, I can't understand why you would keep a kid in a garage.
No.
In all fairness, I don't understand that. Especially if you know that the garage is not heated. Yeah, I mean, he could have, I think he died of hypothermia. He could have died of carbon monoxide poisoning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're in the garage. So why would you keep a kid in the garage? Send them to his room and close the door. But that's not what they did. And so the child paid the price.
Yeah, very sad situation. I don't know how you feel about it, but I just feel CPS and family court should just be abolished.
Actually, I'm not far from that. I think that we need these kinds of institutions because there are bad parents, not so much criminally intended,
Mhm.
but they're neglectful.
Mhm.
And to the best of their knowledge and maybe also ability, this is how they can correct bad behavior with children. This is the best way that they can handle the situation. And so children lose their lives.
Mhm.
So we do need them, but
Mhm.
need those agencies to be held accountable. And that absence of accountability, and I'll add also supervision, are two key components of advocates for change. I say change. Other advocates will tell you reform. That doesn't go far enough. For
Mhm.
me, reform is wearing clean underwear over an unwashed behind.
Thank
Oh my
you.
gosh.
Mm-hmm.
So we need clean behinds and we need clean underwear.
Exactly. Well put. No, I agree.
Don't blush. Don't blush.
No, I mean, I totally agree with you. You could have sent that any better because
Thank you.
everyone's saying, oh, we need family court reform. No, I mean, this is a well-oiled machine that knows exactly what it's doing to these parents, and they are running people through the mill and dragging cases out. They are letting opposing counsels terrorize and go after, a target parent to the point where they off themselves.
Yeah, they commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Suicide is a big factor among men as dads.
Mm-hmm.
Cases of murder suicide is because of the stress that dads are going through. In particular, dads. Women, on the other hand, when they face the same pressures, suicide is not as big as it is among men. What women do is that they have nervous breakdowns, and then they find a BFF, a best friend forever, a confidant that then they can pour their guilt, their sorrow to, and that's how it's a gender difference.
Or
And
or
that's what,
women or women try to take pills and they fail.
and
They
they
fail
fail.
at the suicide. But then you've got the case of Catherine Kasanoff, whose ex was a litigator himself, went after her for 4 years over this long, drawn out thing, abusive to the kids, 20 videos of him screaming. I don't know if you've seen those.
No, I haven't. That one.
Oh yeah, I'll have to send you some of those. And he drove her into the ground. And I mean, parents, she eventually did assisted suicide in Switzerland.
Okay.
She was diagnosed with a third bout of terminal breast cancer.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, her 3 children now are left with their father, who is doing nothing but screaming at her all the time, and the kids. But again, collusion always plays a part in these cases.
Yes, because it's never done alone. You mentioned assisted suicide, and I remember Dr. Kevorkian up in Washington State, who was advocating for assisted suicide, and I think he was prosecuted and jailed himself. But there are some things that are fall under the category of gender difference. And like I said, I think that under the same stresses, women look, women grieve, they bare their souls to, like I said, a friend, a confidant, and men commit suicide. So sometimes murder, suicide by cop, as it's called.
Mhm.
You know, just go off in the street with a stick, knowing that somebody is going to think that that's a weapon, a knife, and they'll just rush or rant and rave until some police officer pulls the trigger and they fall.
Mhm.
And these are pressures that, like you said, they're a system.
Mhm.
And the family divorce court judiciary and its third party tentacles, as I call it, play a major role. And for some people, they say that the system is broken, and I think you alluded to it and said it correctly. It functions as it's supposed to for its own interest.
Mhm.
It's not broken.
Right.
So it doesn't need to be mended.
Yeah, it needs to be abolished. I think, I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I think it should be taken down to civil court where a parent can have a six-man jury.
6-person jury is fine by me. They don't have, and these days I'm not gonna say anything further. 6-person jury. You know, and this is part of supervision and oversight. No one holds the courts accountable.
Mhm, mhm.
One advocate was telling me about a case, and I'm trying to get the name correctly, of a minor, a minor who appeared in court without counsel, as I understand it, or as I remember it, without counsel. The judge had ordered her to undergo a procedure, medical procedure. She didn't know what medical procedure he was going to undertake. And when she became of age and got married, and she and her husband tried to conceive, that's when she found out that the procedure was a hysterectomy.
Oh.
And she went out to sue the judge, sue the court. It went to the Supreme Court, and they voted 5-4, I think, 5-4, that you cannot sue judges. The reasoning being, and it's the same reasoning that the healthcare industry has. If you hold judges so accountable, they can't do their job. And that was the argument that hospital administrators, surgeons, doctors, the unions, etc., were talking about with healthcare and medical malpractice. But if you did you ever see Terry Gilliam's Brazil? Terry Gilliam is one of the Monty Python flying circus members.
No.
Okay. It's a movie about mistaken identity. I'm going to leave it at that. But
Okay.
that had happened often. Because I want people to see the movie. It's a funny movie. You got to pay attention to the movie to understand the humor, which is what I enjoy. But you have to see the humor. And there have been dozens, if not thousands, of cases of hospitals just operating on the wrong patient.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Somebody dropping an E for an A, and they got the wrong patient. A chart being misread, and so limbs were removed, organs were removed.
Exactly.
All accidentally. The
I-
same thing in family court.
Oh, exactly. When I was at work, I opened up a chart and I was looking at it. I was looking at the progress notes. I'm going, wait, this doesn't sound like the patient I'm taking care of. And then I looked at the tag, had a different patient's name on it. It was just put in the wrong chart.
Put in the wrong, and sometimes it's misspelling or the scribble of someone's handwriting, and
Yes.
and like I said, you mistake an A for an E or an O, and it changes the person's name.
Mm-hmm.
This is why, and this, it's a practice that should be done in both family and divorce court, and like I call all its tentacles. When you go into when you visit a doctor, the receptionist takes your name, you sit down, the nurse calls you in, and tells you, asks you for your name, she types it in, your date of birth, she types it in, your address, she types it in. She asks you, what's wrong? And you say, I hurt my arm, and every time I do this, it hurts. Well, the nurse will say, well, don't do this. Okay. And then she said, step out, wait for the doctor to call you. The doctor comes in, calls you, and says, could you give me your name, spell it for me? And if it's not identical to what the nurse wrote, that's a signal. What's your date of birth? If it's not the same what the nurse wrote, that's a signal. What's your address? If that's not the same as that's called verifying. Doctors have to do that. As a matter of fact, here in New York, in Long Island, there's a case of a pediatrician who lost his practice because the documents that he had to prove his case as evidence were not verified. They weren't reviewed. You can go to the child support collection enforcement. Tell them that you have a problem, that your employer hasn't paid you in X number of payroll periods. And they'll tell you, well, we in our notes, you have a block on your name. You owe credit cards? No, I don't owe credit cards. You owe the IRS? No, I don't owe the IRS. Well, the only other reason for it is perhaps you have a child support issue. Go to the child support enforcement unit, have them remove the block, and we'll pay you what you should have been receiving, and we'll pay them the difference. Fine. But there's no obligation. When you sit at the family or the child support collection enforcement unit for them to verify your place of employment. And so you continue not to get paid. And then what they'll tell you, well, you have to navigate the system in order to find someone to help you. What are they going to do? All you need to know is who's responsible for putting blocks on stoppages on payroll and whose authority is it to remove it. And refer me, this is the difference between healthcare and family court. In healthcare, you're referred to someone. That doesn't happen in family divorce court situation. And so you need the child support collection enforcement unit, which is a misnomer. And the reason is that there is no enforcement of collection of child support. What there is enforcement of is payment. But study economy and finance, and what you learn is that enforcing payment, but not collection, doesn't resolve the debt. It's reciprocal. And they both need to be enforced equally. Someone offers payment, there's an obligation to collect that payment. But without the obligation to collect that payment, it creates the debt. It creates the arrear, which then refers to what you were talking about it all being about money. Because there is no enforcement of collection. And so you're left without a job, but still laden with the obligation to make payments. And that's where the abuse shows itself. And if you don't follow along and you don't continue to make payments, then they'll come after, they'll take your tax returns, they'll take your automobile if you have one, they'll close your bank accounts. If you got stocks and bonds, they'll confiscate that. And if you live so long to retire, then your Social Security is tapped, which leaves you then without money to sustain yourself. So you then have to go back into the taxpayer's pocket for public assistance, medical care, for this, that, and the other. And all that is an accumulative cost to what you pay as taxpayers into the annual operating budget, if you will, of these agencies, be it the courtroom, Child Support Collection Enforcement Unit, ACS, CPS, the Children's Law Center. They each have an annual budget of hundreds of millions of dollars to manage hundreds of thousands of cases. If we call that budget X, the number of cases Y, divide X by Y, and you get Z, the cost per case that taxpayers spend annually. If 4, 5, 6, 10 years go by, that's 4, 5, 6, 10 years of taxpayers paying into an agency that hasn't done its job. No one is looking for them or obligating them to do the job, and they're immune anyway. All right. So, for example, I think in 2012, it was, I'm gonna have to make these numbers up, but I'm not far from the truth. In 2012, here in New York, the Child Support Collection Enforcement Unit was getting some $400 million to handle 400,000 cases. X divided by Y, it's $10,000 a case. Okay. From, oops, I think I lost my video here.
I see you. Well, I see your screen.
Oh, okay. All right, but I'm trying.
I don't see you. There you are.
Okay. So you spend, taxpayers are spending $10,000 a case. Let's say it's my case. It's my case. Right? We're in the year 2023. You owe I owe $160,000. Multiply that 10,000 times the years that have passed, and you'll find that you will have spent more than what the debt is worth. Now add that you're retired, as is in some cases, and your Social Security is tapped. So now you have to go to the same public taxpayer's pocket for your rent, utilities, telephone, transportation, food, E.B.T, as they call them here. And you find out how much more above the debt taxpayers are paying for a debt that, as I know from other cases, a solution may have cost no more than what a 3-minute phone call on a public phone. And I know that there are viewers who've never seen a public phone, so they don't know what I'm talking about. But 50 cents, and in a public phone, and what could have been found out in those 3 minutes is, first of all, verify who your employer is, clarify to the employer what the blockage is about, and how to handle it. They could have collected whatever amount of money was owed that could be subtracted from those wages. They could have maintained the call it the payment stream, the revenue stream from which to deduct the amounts, and they could have kept that non-custodial parent employed, all for 50 cents. But there's no oversight, there's no accountability, and so they have no obligation to resolve the debt for 50 cents. And the consequence is that taxpayer then spend more than what the debt is worth. Go ahead.
Exactly. And I also found out a couple years ago that companies also partake of certain monies of the child support payment that is garnished out of someone's wages. So companies are also in it as well.
So what has to be removed is the money incentive,
Mm-hmm.
which brings into focus that Title IV,
Mm-hmm.
Title IV of the Social Security Act.
Right.
Every dollar that's collected, the Child Support Collection Enforcement Unit receives an additional 66 cents. Now we've been talking just about child support, but similarly, ACS, CPS, they all get a piece of that pie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The Children's Law Center, and the whole apparatus is supposed to function with the best interest of the children in mind. It does. I know that I've met employees that said, but we're really trying. I met one this past Father's Day who worked for ACS, and they were telling me that that they are looking into ways of trying to be less intrusive into the families, less for lack of a better word, less intrusive, but without putting the child's life and safety at risk. That's admirable.
Mm-hmm.
That's admirable, and I'm glad that they're doing it. But that's internal. All right, we need external oversight. Mm-hmm. Here in New York, and this is probably a movie that you've seen, the story of Detective Frank Serpico,
mm-hmm.
a New York City detective who was an honest cop, and when he realized that his fellow police officers, it's not a vodka, it's not absolute, that there were police officers that were on the take, he was looking internally through the system to find one. He looked like biblical Job looking for one good man with an NYPD. Mm-hmm. Long story short, and is that he didn't find it. I don't want to spoil the movie for anybody, but it needed external oversight.
Mm-hmm.
The family court apparatus, family divorce court apparatus needs the same thing. It's not enough for ACS, CPS, the Children's Law Center, the Child Support Collection Enforcement Unit, et cetera, to sit among themselves and say, we have to change. What can we change? How can we change it? And does it cause us to be obligated? Does it hold us accountable? And if it does, then it's not a solution. If it takes away that 66 cents, it's not a solution. So we got to find some other way of bringing change, or at least the perception of reform. Dirty underwear, clean behind. Mm-hmm. Clean behind, dirty underwear. Okay, vice versa, if I said the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so this is why among advocates, oversight and accountability are paramount, because under that, with the absence of that, this is where you get the parental alienation. Mm-hmm. All right, this is where you go, the suicides come in. This is where people lose their minds, mm-hmm. Their livelihood, maybe their lives. So they need to be held accountable, much in the same way that surgeons, hospital administrators, nurses, orderlies, cooks in the hospital and clinics, those kinds of things. And so this is why change is necessary, not reform.
Oh, I agree. I know, I was told the Title IV D will probably also B and E need to be repealed. So it would have to go through Congress to get repealed. But how many years is that going to take?
How many generations?
Exactly.
How many generations? Among father advocates, and I'm one of them. We speak about gender inequality, particularly where it comes to reproduction and parenthood. Mm-hmm. We're talking about parenthood, the inequality of parenthood and the abuse. The inequality extends that, and I have to, and I have to paraphrase a portion of Barack Obama, of former President Barack Obama's speech in Chicago, when he mentioned that any fool can conceive, directed at Black men. I heard that, and I immediately took offense as a man of color, because science tells us, not Felix Leo Campos, not patriarchy, not anti-Semitism. Science tells us that it takes two fools to conceive a child.
Mhm.
And the equality in that leaves no dominance by either men or women. You're equal. We are equal. To maintain that equality, we have to do away with the thinking of dominance, gender dominance.
Mhm.
Single fatherhood, such as it exists, and its history teaches that among humans, parenthood is not contingent on sex nor gender role. Both genders, both sexes are equal. And in recent time, I think earlier this year, it's been found out that children raised in single father households actually do much better than children would have otherwise done in single mother households.
Mhm.
There were fewer dropouts, and with fewer dropouts, there are more graduates. With fewer dropouts, there's less delinquency, teen pregnancy, gang life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't understand, and this is my personal stand, I can't understand why anyone would follow an ideology that would dictate to them that the better outcome to a pregnancy is to be aborted and not born and raised in a single father household. I don't understand it. The women who advocate for that, I question and I ask them, would you rather to have been aborted than born? And of course, they don't answer yes or no. They just go off on a tangent and try to deflect the question, because they can't be honest. They cannot be honest. They would be going against the ideology that if a woman doesn't want to be a mother to her child, the de facto outcome should be abortion. So there's no inclusion of men in the decision to be parents. Men are denied the privilege of choosing to be parents. And so the only thing that's left when you don't have the privilege is the responsibility and the obligation. And the consequence of that is male abortion. Male abortion is a term that's used when there aren't, when the biological fathers in particular are not in the household. So women can choose to be or not to be parents to their child. Why not also men? The difference between abortion is a gender difference.
Mhm.
When a man aborts their child, that you and I are left standing on this earth. When a woman decides to abort a child, we would have never set foot on this earth,
Mhm.
which would be the preferable abortion. My opinion,
Mhm.
it's leaving me on this earth.
Mhm.
Because history has proven that parenthood isn't contingent on sex and gender. So it's politicized, it's weaponized against men, and that's one of the reasons why men are the overwhelming population of non-custodial funding.
Okay, I'll say this.
So,
I myself am not for abortion, but I can think of 14 people that should have been aborted. I have a dark sense of humor. I've warned people. I should have warned you. I have a dark sense of humor. My dark
it's
passenger.
okay. I love it. I love it. I like the kind of comedy that you have to pay attention to. I like the Marx Brothers. uh, which is why I like Jack Burns and Allen. You know, a lot of these older comedians, you have to pay attention to what they were saying. Jack Benny has a skit where he's walking down the street and a mugger pulls him into the alley and puts a gun to his head and says, "Your money or your life." Well, and Jack Benny says, I'm thinking.
Right.
But you got to pay attention to it to understand the humor, you know, and so that's the kind of, that's dark humor, as you call it, but it's humor, and I understand it, so I'm all for it. So be as dark as you want to be.
Okay. Well, you know, it's if a woman wants to abort, and she doesn't want the kid, but the man does, okay, he doesn't have a choice.
That's
So, then if a woman has a child and the man doesn't want to be a father, then I'm going to say something.
No choice.
What's that?
He has no choice.
Right.
Held responsible. He's held accountable. He's held liable for the maintenance of a child.
Mm-hmm.
I include myself in hindsight,
Mm-hmm.
for a child who may not be on this earth if the woman doesn't want to be a parent. Mm-hmm. Now, rape victims, women with medical conditions, let's put those women to the side. Right. Okay. Because like children, you know, when they say it's about the children, and they use the children to hide behind, the agenda is hidden behind, well, what about rape victims? And what about women who, you know, who are at risk of losing their lives? For rape victims, let's put them to the side. Mm-hmm. I've been a teacher, and in my classroom experience, I've had children who are products of rape. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Not a happy camper. Mm-hmm. Especially when the word gets out, and then you talk about bullying and teasing, mm-hmm. then they're the ones that are bullied and teasing because of who they are. Oh. And it doesn't surprise me, or it didn't surprise me, that these kids would be so hostile, so aggressive mm-hmm. towards other people, considering what they've gone through from their families, from their circles of friends, if they have any, mm-hmm. their classmates. Okay, and some are just the opposite. They withdraw. Mm-hmm. They want to be invisible. This is a population that's predisposed to suicide mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. because of how they've been treated. You know, what's put in their mind is that they should never have been on this earth. Mm-hmm. Mm. What is that to tell a child? Mm-hmm. You should not have been on this earth. Imagine telling that to Albert Einstein. You should not have been on this earth. Imagine saying that to Sally Ride, who was the first woman astronaut to go into space. Imagine telling her, you should not have been on this earth because you're a product of a rape. Mm-hmm. I sympathize, I empathize with women who are raped. Rape is an act of violence. Okay? And so I'm not for violence. Mm-hmm. And so I can teeter-totter over abortion for women who've been raped. Mm-hmm. Okay. But if you want to argue with me that there are women that run the risk of losing their life because they suffer blood clots or because they have a narrow birth canal, mm-hmm. or any one of a number of medical issues that women face, the answer to that is that you should have known about those risks before you chose to accept the invitation to have sex, mm-hmm. put yourself at risk. Mm-hmm. If you did not know, then that should be symptomatic that girls need to be re-educated, mm-hmm. so that they come to be aware of those risks and through their own medical healthcare oversight, they know whether or not they in particular are at risk, whether you in particular are at risk. And if you know that you are at risk, then you can make a better educated decision when the invitation to have sex is sent to you. But can't blame men for wanting to be parents to children, because the risk, for example, and there are many medical factors, all right? So I don't take any of them lightly. What I do say is that if, here's an example, and it doesn't necessarily have to be accurate. Women with narrow hips have narrow birth canals, and so they run a 24% risk of losing their life if they choose to have children, right? Now, if it's the man with whom she chose to put herself at risk is who wants to be a parent to their child, does that 24% risk jump to 24.1, 25, 26%? If it doesn't, the chances are the same as if she had been born. So from a male reproductive men's rights advocate's position, if we're going to continue to make parenthood unilateral because of what risks women face when they're pregnant, then abdicate all responsibility, abdicate all obligations that are imposed on men to maintain children, and let it be voluntary. And that reciprocates not having the equal privilege of choice to be a parent. Now but the problem is that now we see what men's absence in the home costs. It's the majority of those mass shooters that go into schools, libraries, their place of work, had something in common, and that is that they were raised in a single mother.
Well, I worked in the ER when I did, before my job was rudely taken away from me based on false allegations. I saw, several women come in who have had multiple births from multiple fathers, who are probably collecting child support from these guys and working the system at the taxpayer's expense. So that I disagree with. I think they should completely get rid of Title 4D, get the money out of the picture, and see who really loves the child.
Correct.
And in my case,
and the motivator.
Right.
Money is a motivator. It's an incentive.
Oh yeah. But they would come in with their nails done and stuff like that. But anyway, in family court, there has been a rash of these abusive judges taking away the child from the fit, loving parent and placing them with the abuser. Okay. Then they go after this fit parent, and we'll use me as an example. I was the mother that they removed based on false allegations of she's crazy and parental alienation, and they took my kids away based on lies from a idiotic CPS caseworker. Anyway, what happened was, with the child still being raised in a fatherless home, I'm telling you what, okay, because they took the kids away from me. So he dumped them on his parents. He dumped them on his wife who worked in the courthouse. These kids were left alone unsupervised, and they lost respect for authority. I would only get them every other weekend because, I'm so dangerous, right? So then what happened was, eventually, as time rolls on, one of my kids was in a car accident. Luckily, no one was hurt, but the other siblings showed up, and, the state police were there, the fire trucks were there. But he went up to the state police officer and told him to fuck off. And the trooper told him to stand down. So he, 15 minutes later, went up to the trooper and repeated the same verbiage. And I heard this through, the other sibling. And I'm going, if I had raised them, they wouldn't be talking to any cop or anyone like that. And so I called the state police and I totally brought up the case. And I said, I want to send out an apology because this is what a family court judge did to me. And I was not able to participate in raising my children, because had I been able to participate and we were at 50-50 like we had been for 10 years, they wouldn't be behaving like that or talking to a state trooper like that at all. And it's a whole parentless, when the government gets involved in your life and the family court system gets involved, everyone's getting screwed.
And money's behind it.
And money is the driver. It is the
behind it.
influence.
That and being the authority.
Mm-hmm.
Being above the individual. See, one of the things that we lose sight of in family divorce court matters is that it's the individual against an institution. The institution has the advantage because it is an entity that is continuous. Mm-hmm. So what one generation of that the institution can teach and pass on to the next generation is continuous. Mm-hmm. And it's tweaked to meet the sensitivities of the day, and they tweak it here, they tweak it there, but it's the same premise by the institution. As individuals, you have your experience, and unless there are podcasts or media outlets such as yours to pass it on, it begins and ends with you, just as it would begin and end with me. So with every individual, it's start, stop, start, stop, stop, start. All right, and it's not that way with the institution. It's continuous. In Manhattan Neighborhood Network in the 90s, there were two independent producers who produced a series, a weekly series on ACS. This is going back to the 1990s. Mm-hmm. What they were fighting and representing and bringing out into the open then is the same thing that you're doing through your podcasts. Mm-hmm. I have one father who I interviewed, and I went to his home. At that time, his child was maybe a toddler. And he was trying to get visitation. Mm-hmm. ACS sent one of their caseworkers to his home. They saw the boy's toys. They saw the clothing that the dad had bought for him, but that hadn't had the opportunity to give to his child. So he kept it at the house. Mm-hmm. The toys, he had an electric train set that he mounted for me. And it went from the bedroom into the living room, under the coffee table, back into the bedroom. Mm-hmm. But the kid had not had the opportunity to play with his train set. Mm-hmm. When he went back to court, the caseworker told the judge that his household was unfit to have a child in the house because he had Bob Marley posters on the wall. It's like having a Kurt Cobain poster or a Jimi Hendrix poster, or you're playing Janis Joplin music.
God forbid.
So because of that, he spent 6 years fighting for not just visitation, but it became a custody struggle that he finally won. And now his child is doing very well in school. Mm-hmm. When he was on medication, when he was with his mom, mm-hmm. He was in special ed classes when he was with his mom. Mm-hmm. And his dad argued, this boy doesn't need any of that. What he needs is a parent that won't use the child, like you said, to live off the public assistance and other public programs so that they can enrich themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So now the boy, I'm going to say at this point in time, he may be like 7, 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He rides motorcycle with his dad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
He knows it's frustrating
mm-hmm.
when you're disregarded as an option for a child to be on this earth, first of all. And you go through the difficulties that men, as non-custodial dad, go through. And I empathize with them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. And I empathize with them because I've been through a lot of those. I've been through them. Right? I have been falsely accused of sexual misconduct of my own children in the presence of their grandparents. So I understand. And well, I know that there are women who are in similar situations. I know that the weight is on men. And I'm fortunate that I think that my legacy has passed on to my children, my biological children, and those that I tell people that I have 5 children, 2 girls, my biological children, and 3 older brothers. Each of my children, each of the 5, let me say each of the 4 that I have contact with are all in relationships with a significant partner, a wife, a husband, whatever the case may be, whichever the 2 may be, where they're also raising not only their own children with their partner, but the children their partners the way that I did. That's my legacy. And it doesn't make a difference who the biological parent is. You're a significant part, like I like to think myself, of these children's lives. And they'll call you Pop. They'll call you Dad or Daddy-O.
And
Daddy-O.
yeah. Well, you brought up a good point with ACS going into someone's house and then calling him unfit. And the thing is, they also install parental alienation.
That's correct. Because they're the experts.
They are. I was covering a case where essentially the same thing happened, and they destroyed the bond between the 17-year-old and the parents. And somehow this is allowed to go on. I mean, why don't they focus on the child that was in the garage in the winter? You know, why? I mean, things like that. They're not focusing on the serious abuse cases. They're going after this stupid things they shouldn't even get their noses into.
It's just, but it operates, it functions, it works as it was intended. And that's the point that needs to be made. And underneath all that causes all of this is the absence of oversight and accountability. In the same way that we spoke about this earlier, in the same way that hospitals, doctors, etc., are held accountable, so should this institution of family division. Lives are at stake. Livelihoods. People's general well-being is at stake. People's mental health is at stake. And they can act with impunity.
Right. They're playing with people's lives.
You know, what if What if 17% had been taken from the Child Support Collection Enforcement Unit for not having made a phone call to have resolved an issue that 50 cents would have resolved?
Mhm.
Taxpayers would have, what could you do with $10,000 times
Mm.
14 years?
Well, what also adds to this, when you said oversight accountability, they've got to look very closely at these child support judges. They are illegally tacking on whatever figure they want onto your arrears that you already can't pay because someone else made you lose your job. And there's no oversight or accountability with those judges, as well as the family court judges that put people in this position. There needs to be an overhaul.
No, there's you know, and then they want to threaten you with incarceration.
Yep. Yep.
All right. And a lot of men who are regarded as being feminist males, they just side with complacency, with compliance.
Mhm.
They don't change. They don't say, well, wait a minute. What do you mean? It's a poster, for Christ's sake. Who cares if it were the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or Muddy Waters or Beethoven? What difference does it make? It's music. And you're going to judge me by what music it doesn't make any common sense, but it makes sense. Dollars in a sense, not common sense, is what runs the system. And undermining, you know, if parental alienation had not been viewed as a health condition, a mental health condition, it'd be as disregarded as other abuses by the system. Fortunately, you know, it does have a physical health risk component to it that can be attached to the experience and the work of the institution, family divorce court, and all its tentacles, all right, to make it, to bring it above the mud, if you will, for people to notice. And I'm all for it. What I'm cautious of is that it becomes the sole complaint, and when it's deemed that parental alienation has been eradicated, all the other abuses are forgotten. And so what I tell other advocates, particularly those in the parental alienation circle, I tell them, you got the lead. Bring those behind you, pull them up. Pull them up with you. You know how you're supposed to reach back and help those behind you? Don't treat parental alienation as an isolated and exclusive problem that's affecting millions of people and not any of the others, because it hasn't yet been discovered or hasn't yet been related to physical health or mental health in particular, but that they're just not thought. And the experiences, including parental alienation, all have a mental health component to it. They all do. And when the mental health deteriorates, then all the physical health also deteriorates. Yesterday, I don't know if I should name the program, but I'll name the network. ABC had a morning show, and the host topic was manhood and fatherhood. And she presented, it's the woman, the host was a woman. She presented a father and son who talk about vulnerability and how, and that's a catchphrase in recent years, that they want men to be more vulnerable. But what they describe or where they want men to be vulnerable may not be an area that men feel themselves vulnerable or where they are vulnerable. Ty Diggs, an actor, producer, writer, at one point in time had a TikTok little video where he's crying. He is crying because he hadn't seen his children in a year. That's vulnerability. Does that vulnerability include, is that vulnerability part of the vulnerability that this TV host wanted to showcase? When a pregnancy happens, and this is not to demean women, we can say things that have no anger, that have no prejudice, that have no bias, no phobias, and they're true. It's because they're true that they're resentful. Anytime a man has sex, protected or not, he's vulnerable. And the reason is that if Jurassic Park, forget one of the characters, but in Jurassic Park, one of the characters says that life always finds a way. Protected or not, pregnancies are going to happen. And when they do, men are vulnerable. Is this the kind of vulnerability that this TV host and others wanted to stress? No. Why? Because it doesn't suit their political purpose. It doesn't shame, humiliate, ridicule men who don't support, who don't financially support their children, who aren't in their children's lives. So, an actor crying because they haven't seen their child in a year, and that happens behind closed doors because there are no cameras. In the courtroom. So when your case comes up and that heavy wooden door slams, you're vulnerable. It's a very good chance that no one sees you coming out. Yeah. When you see a rush of court officers all of a sudden running into a courtroom, you're vulnerable. But these are gender differences. Where women are vulnerable, men don't have to be. Where men are vulnerable, women don't have to be. So, but vulnerability is vulnerability. You're at risk. And men are also at risk in certain situations and circumstances. But this is a question of gender equality, and equality has no preference. It has no favors. There are no teacher's pets. And it doesn't provide privilege to one over the other, not without proportional reciprocity. Which now I'll go back to saying that if the decision, the privilege to decide to be a parent is unilateral, then the other who is denied the privilege, although capable and history can prove it, has no responsibility. Privilege and responsibility coexist, and they're proportional. The table might look slanted to you, but when you put a sphere, a rubber ball, or a baseball, or basketball, any ball on that tabletop, it doesn't move. Why? But the table is level. The playing field is level. That's the reason. But to the eyesight, the table looks slanted. Drip some water on it and see if it flows off the edge. If it doesn't, it's level. Everybody's equal.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I've always said, why pay on a horse you can't ride? Okay, so if you can't see your kids, why should you pay child support on them? And thank God for Morgan versus Morgan, which came out, I think it was February 2nd, that came down that the dad wanted to see the kids. He wasn't allowed to see them. There were game playing going on. So the judge canceled the child support, or I can't remember how they worded it more properly legally, but why pay child support on a child that you're being withheld from, and they're also teaching this child to hate you.
Correct. I agree with that. You know, it's difficult. I know cases of again, dads whose visitation is limited to an hour and a half once a month, and it has to be supervised.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That whole
It
thing.
has to be supervised, and then the cost for whoever is supervising that visit comes out of the non-custodial father. It's not a lot of time to poison a child's mind, let alone have a bond, create a
Right.
bond in an hour and a half.
Right.
Okay, so the equality in this is that whosoever is the custodial parent, whosoever has the 5 days a week access to the child, is the one most likely responsible for poisoning that child's life, that child. But you can't, it's, you know, I mean, how well organized must you be to be able to poison a child's mind in just an hour and a half in front of somebody who's taking notes?
Right, right. And some of these parents, like, I think I read, if I read this correctly, if I'm wrong, correct me, but Catherine Youssef Kasanoff, she was paying $2,500 a week in visitation just to see her daughters. Now, why?
For kids.
Yeah, and again, the father was alienating her from her children. The thing is, these visitation centers have got to go. You know, if a judge doesn't have it figured out by now who the alienator is, you know, these judges don't need education because they already have enough education. They already know what they're doing. They already know who the alienator is, and they're playing along because they know there's a lot of money involved.
A lot of money involved. That's correct. As long as you can keep these cases open, you justify the tens of thousands of dollars that the courts or ACS, CPS, or the Legal Law Center, the longer that you can keep these cases open, the more justification there is for the $10,000 that they get to manage per case.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, Halle Berry, not Bailey, the actress who is starring now in as the Little Mermaid. Halle Berry has quoted saying saying that this child support is a racket.
Yeah, I'm glad she came forward and said that, because she went back because she felt the payment that she was being extorted from was too high. This is all extortion. And I'm glad she went back and fought it. And I know a lot of guys said, well, that's because she's a woman and she can get away with that. It's like, no, I don't care if it's a man or a woman, actress or actor, stand up and go back and say, this is too high, and start forcing them to a standard of some sort. It's illegal anyway, extortion.
And that's what it is. It's, you know, it's 17% of gross income is taken out of payroll.
That's, yep.
Right, per child.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're paying 17%, and this is before taxes. Now understand this, that even though that 17% is taking out before taxes, the IRS still calculates your taxes on your 100%, your gross income.
Right.
Doesn't deduct the 17 from your gross income and then take it from there. Mm-hmm. They'll charge you, they'll calculate your taxes on the 100%. Now, 17%. It doesn't leave you, like it does with so many people, it doesn't leave you with enough to subsist on. The courts will tell you, well, go get a second job.
Yeah.
Okay. You go get a second job. Now that it's no longer 17% of one job. Mm-hmm. Now it's 17% of two.
Right.
Okay. And you're still left with insufficient monies to sustain yourself. So now you go, as they'll tell you, you go underground, off the books. You appear in court. The judge will tell you, or the opposing counsel will say, well, Your Honor, the cost of living is this. The two jobs that he has is that. How does he make ends meet?
Mm-hmm.
There's income that he or she is getting that she's not reporting. The judge will agree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There has to be a case. And so the judge will come down on you for withholding your income.
Mm.
That they can then charge a 17%, not of 3 different incomes, but of 3 jobs.
And also, go ahead.
It just doesn't calculate to make any common sense, like you mentioned. I apologize.
Right. Even if a parent loses their job, like in my case, I no longer had my nursing job. The judge had it in her thick head that I was still a full-time nurse, which I was never, ever full-time. I was always per diem. And so I could run the kids to their dental appointments and things like that. Okay. But in her, she didn't, I don't know. Did she read the case? Did she look at the evidence? What the hell is she doing on the bench? If you can see that, hey, a parent involuntarily lost their job, why are you still holding them to a wage that they cannot ever make again, ever? They're doing this all the time. This is completely illegal.
But it gets by because the judiciary looks out for women.
Yes.
In family court, they talk about the black robe of silence. I mentioned Frank Serpico, and there's the blue shield, the blue wall of silence, the brotherhood that you don't snitch, you don't squeal on a fellow police officer. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of things. And the same thing is with family court.
Mm-hmm.
I would, and I'm going back to the 1990s when I had hair on my head and it was black. I also worked as a per diem here in New York City. And I remember then, I don't know if it's still the case now, but I remember then I would get phone calls at home at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning from the board, or the then Board of Education, now it's called the Department or whatever it is, of Education. I would get a phone call, and it was always the same woman. He would say, "Are you available to work today?" I said, "Yes, I am." I didn't take a full-time job because at the time, my wife had to be downtown. She worked in the financial district, and she had to be at her office at 8 in the morning. So at 7:30, when she had to be on the train platform to go to work, schools aren't open, and we're talking about preschool kids. So I said, look, I have my per diem license. I can work per diem. I can always start after 8 o'clock. So I would take my child, and other kids in the neighborhood, we would just go trekking through the park to the center. This woman would call me, "Are you available to work?" "Yes, I am." I'd show up. The following day, she would call me, "Look, the same school would like to have you back because they like how you." Okay, it didn't make a difference, but I have to take my child to work, to school first. So just show up. Third day comes around, and she would call me and said, "Look, the school asked for you by name." And this had happened with other schools because I was per diem and I didn't always work in the same school. So I scratched my head, which is probably why I'm bald now. Mm-hmm. And I asked her, well, why are they asking for me by name? And she told me, because you go back a second and third day to the same problem school. To be a teacher, a per diem teacher, to the same problem class. And what's more, she was told, you at least kept those kids in the classroom. Okay. So if that's a legacy, that's a legacy. But I was working per diem. I was being charged as a fully licensed teacher on the per diem salary. That didn't make any sense.
Wow.
It didn't make any common sense. When I was accused of sexual inappropriate behavior to my own child, I was told, what's the evidence? Well, forensic evidence says that there were bruises or marks or scratches.
Mm.
I never did. But they went on that, and the judge told me, this happened to others, that if I contest the ruling in family court, they will take that docket to criminal court, and then I'll be charged criminally for whatever, rape, sodomy, whatever it is, in criminal court, which means that I would have been arrested, taken to lockup, and for, if you don't know, or your viewers, in the prison hierarchy, the most bottom rung are pedophiles.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right? They either commit suicide in anticipation of avoiding being abused, or they're murdered in prison. But oddly enough, the honor among thieves is that you don't abuse, you don't rape, you don't sodomize, you don't do these kinds of things to children. Mm-hmm. The younger the children, the more you're at risk. Mm-hmm. I would have been at risk. Mm-hmm. Just on the accusation alone. And the accusation of rape, the false accusation of rape, is big. Mm-hmm. Bigger than what anyone would want to admit. Mm-hmm. Here in New York, not too long, but this is 2023, so I'm thinking maybe 2021, 22, there's a South Bronx female rapper by the name of Cardi B, who admitted to having done what at that time Bill Cosby, the entertainer, had been charged with and had denied. Okay. She was rewarded. She got a Grammy. He was punished. He was facing 2 to 8 years of incarceration. This is an 80-plus-year-old man fighting the charges of false allegations of rape, and saying, I would rather face the 2 to 8 years than to admit to having done something that I hadn't done. Decades earlier, in 1989, here in New York, 5 Black and brown teenagers had been incarcerated for having beaten up and raped a jogger in the north end of Central Park. They were exonerated. Now they're now called the exonerated 5. Mm-hmm. Someone, a suspect in an unrelated case, had admitted to having done what they were accused of. Mm-hmm. And that's what got them exonerated. Mm-hmm. Here's my point in terms of false allegations. Mm-hmm. Had that suspect's admission had been dismissed, disregarded, and ignored as Cardi B's admission to having done what so many men are accused of, and in many instances falsely, mm-hmm. in the year 2023, there would still be 5 falsely accused, wrongfully convicted, and unjustly incarcerated teenagers. Lives are at stake, and all for money and dominance. Mm-hmm. Money and dominance, and those 2 things have to be eradicated. They have to be addressed. Mm-hmm. Equality isn't a one-way dead-end street with 2-way traffic. Mm-hmm. It goes both ways. Otherwise, it wouldn't be equality. Call it whatever name you want. It wouldn't be equality. Mm-hmm. And so when parental alienation when as you mentioned the child support, when those issues come up, we have to look at the institution. We have we have to look at the policies, the practices, the procedures, the law, to assure ourselves that they haven't been corrupted, that they haven't been usurped, or that they're not used for empowerment purposes.
Mhm.
Okay? And those that are guilty of it should be held accountable,
Mhm.
whether it's an institution or an individual.
I agree. Well, I'm so glad I had you on because I'd like to have you come back on my podcast again
My pleasure.
because I think
My,
I think we can talk all day about this.
and we can go from one stream to another and come back because we realize that they're all intertwined, that they're all related, that they're not isolated instances of anything, that they all have something to do with one another that affect people's mental health. When the
Yes.
mind goes, the body's going to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Where can people reach you if they have any questions?
They can reach me but via email. My email address, I don't have a parental anything advocate page or anywhere. All right. But I do subscribe to several of them. And so email is probably the best.
Okay.
And that's Felix, Felix _Leo, LEO _C at Hotmail. And if they put Marianne in the subject line or slam the gavel on the subject line, then I know that they're coming through you, and I won't just chuck them into the delete file.
Okay. Well, I'm so glad. We're going to talk again, but
Steve, by all means. By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've done short videos that people can now find on YouTube. You can just type in my name, Felix Leo Campos, Campos, on YouTube. My page will come up, and among excerpts from television shows that I've done, excerpts from my reel that I've posted, you'll find videos like Daddy's Old Shoes. I did a video about alienation with a dad from Long Island, and you'll see clips also of marches and advocacy, civil disobedience videos that I participated in and helped to highlight. So you can also look me up on YouTube.
okay. Well, thank you so much. Don't
Thank
jump off.
It's an honor.
Oh, well, you're coming back on. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Join us again here in the future with Felix Leo Campos and other exciting guests. And I totally thank you. You can find my channel here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and Anchor FM and iHeartRadio. Thank you so much, Felix. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. Like I said, I have family in Penn State and Pittsburgh, and so
Cool.
we'll catch up to one another.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.